Hello friends, welcome back to another video of Automation Testing Insider. So sorry for the delay friends, it's been a long time I haven't uploaded any videos. So sorry for that again. And today I come up with great news that I'm going to start API series from today onwards. So this is on-demand series from many of our family members from ATI family. So I'm going to start the API series from today onwards, and we are going to cover as part of this API testing like the basics of API, all the concepts of API, and later on we'll talk about the Postman tool, the manual testing, the manual API testing using Postman, and later on we'll cover Rest Assured as well, and then probably I'll cover the Ready API automation tool as well. So this is going to be very exciting series, so please like, share and subscribe this channel. So let's get started with today's topic, the basics of API. And in going forward, like a few sessions will be on like theoretical stuff, and later on we'll start with Postman. So let's get started with the basics of API. So this is the agenda for today. So we are going to talk about what is an API. We'll understand the definition of API, what do you mean by API, and we'll understand better when we talk about different examples. So I'll provide different examples so that you can relate better and you can understand better what is an API. We'll also talk about what is API testing and how to perform API testing, like what are the ways we can perform API testing. And at last, we'll talk about what are the different types of APIs. So these are the basics of APIs, which are very important when we start learning any tool like Postman and Ready API or Rest Assured or any other tool like SOAP UI. So these are the basic topics which are very important. So let's get started with the first topic. What is an API? So what is an API? So API stands for Application Programming Interface. So here the word interface is coming. Correct. So interface is nothing but the channel or medium using which the application programs can communicate with each other. Correct. Let me explain you with the help of an example so that you can understand better or you can relate better. So let's say there are two person A and there is a person called B. Now they want to communicate with each other. They want to share their ideas or they want to share their information. So how they are going to connect? So there are different ways they can communicate. There are different mediums. So how they are going to connect? Let's say the first one is using call. So they will call through mobile phones, or they will call through landline or video calls or any other medium using calls, right? So they can call each other and they can share their ideas. So this is the first way. Another way could be using text messages. What are the different text messages we have? Like normal text they can send through mobile phone, or they can WhatsApp chat using WhatsApp chat, or through FB Messenger. So these are the different ways they can communicate using text messages. Another way could be A person will reach to B person house and discuss about their ideas, or B person will come to A's house and discuss their ideas. So these are the different mediums, or I would say these are the interface, right? Call through text, or will go through that B's house using some medium and discuss about our ideas. So they are sharing their information. So this is an example of API. In the similar way, in software industry or in software programs, what happens is they are communicating with each other. They are communicating with each other with the help of API, with interface called API, Application Programming Interface. Now question arises here is why they want to communicate, right? What is the need they communicate with other application programs or other application? So the reason is, let's say this A program will develop certain features and some features they want from the outside. So what they will do, they'll use the API to get those information or those features from application B. Similarly, C wants some features, so we'll get it from will request to B application and will get the response. So this is how API works, and this is called the API. We'll understand better in the next slide when we provide some more examples about the API. So if I give the proper definition of API, that would be like an API is a way for two or more computer programs communicate with each other. So here we are requesting something from the other application program and we get some response using the API. So that is an interface that is called application programming interface. Now let me give you an example of API so that you can understand better. So let's say I'm working on any application and I'm banking application. Okay, I am developing a software in banking. So I have written certain features and I have done the UI and everything. I have set up a complete banking application. Now I need some more certain complex functionalities. Let's say take an example, just simple example. Suppose I want to calculate the simple interest formula. So I want to calculate the simple interest or compound interest. Correct. I want to develop those features in my banking application. So what I'll do, I have to write the code and I have to build the logic in my application. That is one way. Another way is just take an example. These features are very complex. What I'll do, because that features are already developed by other companies, so I'll request that company to provide the source code or the information about the logic of that simple interest. So let's say there is another company, my friend's company, who is also already built a banking application and they have those simple interest, compound interest and some other complex features they have, right? Now what I'll do, I know that they have already developed the simple interest complex logic. Just take an example that is very complex. Okay, that logic is very complex. So they have already built the logic for that one. So what I'll do, I'll request them to provide the source code or the logic information or the complete source code for my company, for my banking application. But the question arises here is why they will provide you the details, right? Why they will give the source code or the complete details. So there is a kind of security reason, or because of the data security, they will not provide the details. They will not provide the complete details or source code to our company. So what is the alternative? So here comes the concept of API. So what these guys will do, the other company, they will build the API. They will build the API and on simple interest, and they will give the access so that we can use this API. So we'll get the API from here and we'll get the response. So we build this logic, we'll call this API in our application to calculate the simple interest in our banking application. So everything like UI and everything will be the same for our banking application, but only thing is we are calling the APIs from different companies, right? The logic and everything will be developed here and we are just calling the API. So API is nothing but the functions or the complex functions, and the logic is written which I'm just calling in my application. So this is an example of API. If I give the other example, let's say nowadays we are using mostly the Google Map, right? Google Map application we are using a lot, which is developed by Google itself, right? And there is another application called WhatsApp. So generally we used to share the location through Google, through WhatsApp, to our friends or family members, right? So here we are using, this is different application. WhatsApp is the different application, but we are using the logic, the functions from Google, which is already developed by Google Map. So here we are just using the APIs of Google Map. So this is another example of API. Another example could be, let's say we want to sign in, or we want to access different application like Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or any other application, correct? So what we'll do, we have, when we launch this FB or application or FB page, what we need to do is we need to sign in, correct? We have to authenticate that user. So we can see on like many applications using the Google accounts to authenticate, right? So they are not written the logic for that authentication, because we can already we can authenticate using Google account, right? So there are a couple of options like sign in using Google account or Microsoft account. So that Google account is already created by me or us, Google account. So we are just using those authentication in FB page to sign in, or Twitter page to sign in, or LinkedIn page to sign in, or any other application. So the authentication will be already done at Google, correct? Because we have provided all the information at Google and the account is already created. So we are just using the APIs in the different platform like AFB, Twitter, LinkedIn, and any other application. So these are the examples of APIs. So now let me talk about some more examples. So weather data. To get the weather data, there are different APIs from which we can get the weather information like Open Weather Map or ClimateSail. Login any application using Google account, FB, Twitter, etc. So this is the example which we have discussed in the previous slide. Next is e-commerce store. So if you remember, we when we use any e-commerce website, let's say take an example of Amazon, when we reach to the payment page while making any order, placing any order, so there are different payment options, payment gateways, correct? So those are built by different companies, but we are just using in Amazon payment page to initiate the payment. So this is another example of API. Travel booking. So this is very common and very important example of API. So let's say we want to book the flight for we want to travel somewhere and we want to book the flight. So we'll book through, there are different applications from where we book the flight, GoIbibo or Make My Trip. So there are different applications from where we can book the flight, correct? So we'll enter all the information like first name, last name, and complete information, user information, and the date on which we are flying, correct? So what we'll do when we click on search, so we'll get certain flight details, correct? So those information will come from different airlines, let's say Air India, Indigo, or some other airlines. So we'll get all the information from those airlines on my GoIbibo application or GoIbibo page. So that we'll see what are the different flights on that particular day. So these are all these prices details and everything is not developed in this GoIbibo. We are getting it from the airlines. So that is nothing but the example of API. So we are not accessing their database. We are just getting the information using the API on our page. Similarly for Make My Trip. So this is another example of APIs. Now let's talk about what is API testing, correct? So if you remember, guys, we have different tier application. So there are different types of application like one tier application, we have two tier application, and we have three tier application. So generally we are using nowadays all the applications are three tier application. So what happens is one tier or single tier application, we have client and database at same place. Stored at same place is nothing but the one tier application. The client is nothing but where we access something, the user, when we try to access something or we want some information, and the database is where we store the data. So these two applications are at same place, is nothing but one tier application. Whereas we talk about the two tier application, so client and database are stored, or server database server are placed at different places, correct? So when we request to the database and we get the data on our client machine. So this is two tier application. So these two are at different system. Now if I talk about three tier application, so this is the example of three tier application. So here we have three tier application. The first one is presentation layer, second one is business layer, and third one is database layer. So this is three tier application. So how it works, let's talk about it. So as a user, I request something. So take an example, Google page. I need some information from Google search. So I'll write down like API testing and click on search. So what happens is we want some information. So that is nothing but the front end. That is nothing but the presentation layer, the UI, which we can see, presentation layer. And we are requesting, and the data goes to, the information goes to business layer through business layer, and from we'll get the data from database. So what happens at business layer stage? What happens is the complex business scenarios are written in this business layer. Correct. So the data, the based on our information, it calculates or it manipulates the data, it manipulates the information and everything, and then requests the database to provide the data. So take an example, we just want the get information, or we just want to get some information. So it will go through the business layer and the database, get the data from database, and it will show us the result about the API testing. Whatever we search on the UI, we'll get the information from the database. So this is how this three-tier application works. So if you see, there is a middle layer, business layer. So this is nothing but where we write the business logic. Business logic is nothing but the APIs which we cannot see. Correct? Which we cannot see. The logic is developed here. We do not see because we can see the presentation layer, which is developed in some front end languages like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and all those language. Using those, we prepared this presentation layer or UI. Here we have different we use different programming languages like Java, Python, or Ruby, Perl, any programming language we use here, and develop these complex scenarios. So let's say, suppose I want to get the information, suppose I want to calculate 2 plus 2 from my UI screen. So what it does, here it will come 2 plus 2, 4, it will calculate and store the data in database and revert the information, and we'll get the information on UI like 4. 2 plus 2 is 4. So the logic will be developed here, the calculation will be developed here. Now what is API testing? So when we perform testing over here, when we perform testing on business layer, that is nothing but API testing. But the question arises here is, we cannot see this business layer, right? Business logic we cannot see. So how we are going to provide? So using different tools, we are going to provide the we use the different tools to perform this API testing. We'll discuss about those tools like Postman, how we are sending the request, how we get the data. So basically we are sending the request, we are getting the data from server. That is the that is how it works, the API testing. So here you can see API testing works here on business layer. So this is a simple example like how it works, how we are sending the data and how we are getting the response. In coming videos, we are going to talk about all these details in a practical way, much more practical way, so that you can understand better like how we are sending the request and how we are getting the response. For now, just understand that like on this business logic, like business layer, the complex logic is written, that is nothing but the APIs. How to perform API testing? So there are two ways we can perform API testing. One is manual way, manually we can perform, and second one is through automation. So we'll talk about the Postman tool where we can perform our API testing manually, and there are some automation tool like Rest Assured, we have Ready API, or we have SOAP UI. So these are the automation tools using which we can perform API testing using automation tools. So these are the two ways we can perform API testing. Types of APIs. So there are two types of APIs, SOAP UI, SOAP API and REST API. So the full form of SOAP is Simple Object Access Protocol. And this is the oldest technology, like old technology. And most of the companies now using this REST, which is like 80% of the companies using REST. REST is nothing but representational state transfer. So these are the two important APIs. The logic the API logic is written based on SOAP or REST APIs. So what happens is here we transfer the data in the form of XML only, and here in REST we have different format using XML, using JSON, plain text, or HTML. So there are different ways we can transfer our data using REST API. So this is another like difference. So we'll talk about them in detail in separate video. Probably in the next video I'll talk about them in a detailed way, and I'll give some examples as well. And using Postman also I'll show you the practical way how we can initiate SOAP and REST APIs. So this is all for today, guys. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment box of this video. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. Please, if you are new to my channel, then please subscribe this channel. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.